Ever have that moment scrolling through social media, seeing some 25-year-old influencer flex their investment portfolio, while you're left wondering if you've already missed the boat completely? Well, I've got news that's going to flip that entire narrative on its head. Your 40s aren't the decade where your financial dreams go to die. They're actually the decade where they finally come alive. I'm better, and I spend way too much time analyzing the mathematics of wealth building and the psychology behind why some people achieve financial freedom, while others stay stuck in the same patterns for decades. If you've hit the big 40 and feel like you're behind everyone else financially, or if you're convinced all the good opportunities have already passed you by, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Because today I'm going to prove to you with hard data and real examples that your 40s are actually your wealth building sweet spot. Here's what nobody tells you about aging and money. While everyone's obsessing over starting early and compound interest calculators that make 22-year-olds look like financial geniuses, they're completely missing the bigger picture. Sure, time in the market matters, but so does the amount you can actually invest. And guess what? Your ability to generate serious money doesn't peak when you're young and broke. It peaks when you're experienced and valuable. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Your brain, that magnificent computer between your ears, doesn't actually hit its prime until your 40s. I know. You wake up some mornings feeling like your joints are held together with duct tape and good intentions. But we're not talking about your ability to sprint upstairs without making involuntary groaning sounds. We're talking about your cognitive horsepower. Research from Harvard and MIT shows that while your physical abilities peak back when you still had hair in places you wanted it, and none in places you didn't, your brain's ability to synthesize complex information and make strategic decisions is just hitting its stride. Think about it like this. A 25-year-old might have the energy to work 80-hour weeks, but they're also the same person who thinks putting their entire paycheck into meme stocks is a solid investment strategy. You, on the other hand, have something they don't: pattern recognition. You've seen enough cycles to know that what goes up usually comes down, and what seems too good to be true usually is. You understand that boring often beats exciting when it comes to building real wealth. And most importantly, you've made enough mistakes to know which ones to avoid making again. This isn't just theoretical fluff. The data backs it up in a big way. According to research published in Harvard Business Review, professional peak performance in knowledge-based careers typically occurs between ages 40 and 55. That's not a coincidence. It's the sweet spot where experience meets energy, where wisdom meets ambition. Take Sam Walton, for example. The guy had a decent but unremarkable career managing retail stores through his 20s and 30s. Nothing that would make you think he become one of the richest people in history. But at 44, he opened the first Walmart. Not exactly the age when most people are thinking about revolutionizing entire industries. Yet by the time he died, he'd built an empire that made his family the wealthiest in America, with a net worth that now exceeds $400 billion. Or consider this: the average age of Nobel Prize winners when they do their prize-winning work is 40. These are people who peaked early and coasted. These are individuals who spent decades building expertise, making connections, and developing the deep understanding necessary to solve complex problems. But peak performance is just the beginning. Your 40s are also your peak earning years. And this is where the wealth building math gets really interesting. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, median earnings hit their highest point between ages 45 and 54. But here's where it gets even better. That's just the median. When you look at high earners, the advantage becomes absolutely massive. PayScale research shows that college-educated professionals see their salaries continue climbing throughout their 40s, with peak earnings typically hitting around age 50 to 52. We're talking about increases of 30 to 50% from their 30s baseline. Surgeons and medical specialists, they often don't hit their stride until their mid-40s. That's when they're making $400,000 to $600,000 annually. For corporate executives, their highest compensation packages typically come in their late 40s and early 50s. And senior software engineers at major tech companies? They often don't crack those $300,000 total compensation packages until they're well into their 40s, too. But here's the thing, this isn't just about the raw numbers. It's about leverage. By the time you're in your 40s, if you've been strategic, you've built what I call career capital. You possess specialized skills that are both rare and valuable. You have a proven track record of delivering results. You understand now how to navigate complex business relationships and organizational politics. You've built industry connections and a solid reputation. All of this translates into a negotiating power you simply didn't have in your 20s or 30s. You can command higher salaries, secure better positions, or even start your own business with a built-in network of potential clients and partners. Think about it. When a 25-year-old asks for a raise, they're often hoping someone takes pity on their student loans. When a 45-year-old asks for a raise, they're backing up that request with 2 decades of measurable value creation. Now, I can already hear the objections. But better, what about compound interest? What about starting early? Haven't I already missed the boat? This is where we need to bust one of the biggest myths in all of personal finance. The idea that if you don't start investing in your 20s, you're doomed to financial mediocrity. Let me show you why the math doesn't support this doom and gloom narrative. Let's run a comparison between an early starter and a so-called late starter. Our early starter begins at age 25, putting away $500 a month for 40 years. Assuming a 7% annual return, they end up with approximately $1.3 million. Not bad at all. And this is exactly why financial gurus love preaching the start early gospel. But now, let's look at our supposedly late starter who begins at 40. Here's the key difference. Because they're in their peak earning years, they can afford to invest $1,500 a month. They do this for 25 years at that same 7% return. What does that get them? They end up with about $1.2 million, almost exactly the same result, but with 15 fewer years in the market. And here's the beautiful part, that $1,500 a month is totally realistic for someone in their 40s who's hitting their career stride. It's not some fantasy number that requires living on ramen noodles and never having any fun. It's what happens when you combine peak earning power with the wisdom to live below your means. But let's take this even further. What if our 40-year-old can save $2,500 a month? That's completely achievable for someone making excellent money in their prime earning decade. At $2,500 a month for 25 years, they accumulate $2 million. Now they've blown past the early starter by a significant margin. This proves that compound interest doesn't care about your age. It cares about the size of your contributions and the time you give it to work. This is the secret that nobody talks about when they're busy shaming people for not starting to invest at 22. Consider Warren Buffett, the poster child for long-term investing. He didn't become a billionaire until he was 56 years old. Think about that for a second. The most famous investor in history didn't hit the billion-dollar mark until he was well past his 40s. And here's the kicker. 99% of his wealth was accumulated after age 50. If that doesn't shatter every excuse you've been telling yourself about being too old to build wealth, I don't know what will. The man who literally wrote the book on compound interest didn't even hit his financial stride until most people think they're supposed to be winding down. Here's what's really happening in your 40s that makes this decade so powerful for wealth building. You've developed something that's absolutely priceless in the world of money management: wisdom. And I don't mean the kind of wisdom that comes from reading finance books or watching YouTube videos. I mean the hard-earned, battle-tested wisdom that only comes from making actual mistakes with real money and living to tell about it. You remember that time in your 20s when you bought a timeshare because the salesperson offered you free Disney tickets? Yeah, that's not happening again. You've learned to spot financial nonsense from 3 zip codes away. You understand that when someone promises guaranteed returns with no risk, they're probably selling something that rhymes with Ponzi scheme. You've developed what I call street smarts for money, and that's worth more than any fancy MBA when it comes to building actual wealth. This wisdom shows up in countless ways. You're less likely to panic when the stock market has one of its dramatic temper tantrums. You've been through enough recessions to know they're temporary. You've seen enough market crashes to understand their opportunities in disguise. You're not the person refreshing your portfolio every 5 minutes, wondering if you should sell everything because some talking head on television said the sky is falling. But it's not just about avoiding bad decisions. Your 40s are when you start making genuinely smart ones. You understand the real cost of debt because you've probably paid it. You know the difference between good debt and stupid debt. You've learned that borrowing money to buy a jet ski is not the same as borrowing money to buy rental property. You've figured out that credit cards are financial tools that can either build wealth or destroy it, depending on who's holding them. Take Julia Child, for instance. She spent years wandering through various government jobs, feeling completely lost about her purpose in life. Sound familiar? It wasn't until she hit 36 and moved to France that she discovered her passion for cooking. But here's the crucial part. She didn't immediately quit everything and open a restaurant like some impulsive 25-year-old might. For years, she learned and studied, making countless mistakes in the kitchen. She understood that mastery takes time. Shortcuts don't work. It wasn't until she was 49 that she wrote her first cookbook. 49, an age when society tells women they're supposed to become invisible. That cookbook became Mastering the Art of French Cooking and launched a culinary empire that lasted decades. Her television career didn't begin until she was 50. All because she possessed the wisdom to know real success isn't about speed, it's about substance. Or consider Vera Wang. She climbed the corporate ladder at Vogue for 17 years before moving to Ralph Lauren. When she was passed over for editor-in-chief at Vogue, a crushing professional blow that would have sent many into early retirement, she did something different. At 40, she made a calculated decision to enter the fashion industry not as an employee, but as an entrepreneur. She used every lesson she'd learned about fashion, business, and yes, even disappointment, to build what would become a billion-dollar bridal empire. This is emotional and financial maturity in action. Both Julia and Vera understood something nearly impossible to grasp when you're young and inexperienced: the importance of patience and persistence. The understanding that setbacks are often setups for comebacks. The recognition that your timeline doesn't have to match anyone else's. Here's another massive advantage you have in your 40s that nobody talks about: clarity. By this point, you've tried enough different things to know what you're good at and what you're not. You've had enough jobs to understand what energizes you and what drains you. You've been in enough relationships to know what kind of people you want around you. Most importantly, you've lived enough life to know what actually matters. This clarity is your superpower because it lets you focus your energy and resources on what will actually move the needle. You're not scatter-shooting efforts across 17 different priorities, hoping something sticks. You know what you want, and you can channel everything toward achieving it. This focused approach is incredibly powerful in wealth building. When you're young, you might invest in anything that sounds exciting: cryptocurrency, penny stocks, your buddy's startup that's going to revolutionize how people eat cereal. You're trying to hit home runs because you think that's how wealth gets built. By your 40s, you understand wealth gets built through consistent base hits, not wild swings at every pitch. You've also gained something else invaluable: perspective on risk. This doesn't mean becoming risk averse to the point of keeping all your money in savings accounts earning negative real returns after inflation. It means understanding the difference between intelligent risk taking and gambling. Diversification isn't just a fancy word finance people throw around. It's a mathematical approach to managing uncertainty. You've learned the biggest risk isn't losing money in the stock market. It's not investing at all and watching inflation slowly erode your purchasing power over decades. You understand keeping all your money in cash feels safe, but is actually a guaranteed way to grow poorer over time. This perspective allows you to take the kind of calculated risks that truly build wealth. But perhaps most importantly, you've developed patience. Real patience, not the fake kind from inspirational quotes on Instagram. You understand compound interest is called the eighth wonder of the world for a reason, and that reason isn't because it works overnight. You've learned to think in decades, not quarters. You can plant financial seeds today knowing you won't see the full harvest for years, and you're okay with that because you understand how the game actually works. This patience extends beyond investing. It shows up in career decisions, business ventures, and major life choices. You're not looking for get-rich-quick schemes because you've seen enough fail spectacularly. You're looking for get-rich-slowly strategies that actually work, even if they're not as exciting to talk about at dinner parties. The research backs this up in fascinating ways. Studies show people in their 40s make significantly better financial decisions than younger individuals. They're less likely to take on high-interest consumer debt, more likely to have emergency funds, better at distinguishing wants from needs, and more realistic about retirement timelines. All of this translates into something that might shock you. Your 40s are when you finally stop making the financial mistakes that keep most people broke forever. You know that shiny new car isn't an investment. It's a depreciating asset with a monthly payment attached. You know that your house isn't your retirement plan. It's where you live. You've realized credit card rewards aren't free money. They're marketing schemes meant to get you to spend more. But here's where it gets truly interesting, and what separates the wealth builders from the wealth dreamers. By your 40s, you've developed what I call a financial immune system. You've been exposed to enough financial viruses that you've built resistance to the dangerous ones. You don't get excited when a neighbor shares a hot stock tip. You don't panic when the market drops 20% in a month. You don't fall for the latest cryptocurrency promising to make you rich if you just buy now, before it goes to the moon. This financial immune system is worth more than any investment strategy because it stops you from making the catastrophic errors that can wipe out decades of progress in months. You've seen what happens when people put everything into one investment. You've watched friends lose their shirts chasing the next big thing. You've learned the most dangerous words in investing are, "This time is different." And speaking of dangerous, let's talk about something nobody mentions when they're busy telling you it's too late to build wealth. Here is the hidden advantage of starting your serious wealth building journey in your 40s. You skip the stupid phase entirely. When you start investing in your 20s, you usually spend the first decade making every possible mistake. You buy high and sell low because you don't understand market cycles. You chase performance, jumping from fund to fund based on last year's returns. You panic during corrections and sell at exactly the wrong time. You get talked into whole life insurance by smooth-talking salespeople. You invest in individual stocks because you think you can outsmart professional fund managers. By the time you figure things out, you're approaching 40 anyway. So starting in your 40s means you skip that expensive education phase and go straight to the wealth building phase. You can implement a boring, diversified, low-cost investment strategy from day one because you're old enough to appreciate boring. And boring is beautiful when it comes to money. Here's another massive advantage that comes with age. You've learned to ignore noise. And man, is there a lot of noise in the financial world. Every day, someone predicts the next crash. Every week, there's a new investment trend that's going to revolutionize everything. Every month, some expert explains why everything you thought you knew about money is wrong. When you're young, you listen to all of it. You read every article, watch every video, follow every guru. You change your strategy every time you read something new, thinking more information means better results. By your 40s, you've learned that more information often means paralysis. You understand the best investment strategy is usually the most boring one, and the best time to change your strategy is almost never. This ability to filter out noise and focus on what actually matters is incredibly valuable. While younger investors second-guess themselves and switch strategies constantly, you can stick with a plan for decades. And consistency, it turns out, is one of the most powerful forces in wealth building. Look, if you're sitting there in your 40s thinking you've missed the wealth building train, you're not just wrong, you're spectacularly wrong. You haven't missed anything. You've actually arrived at the station just as the express is pulling up. You have peak earning power, battle-tested wisdom, laser focus, and enough time for compound interest to work its magic. While everyone else panics about starting late, you can quietly build the kind of wealth that would make your 25-year-old self weep with envy. Your best financial decade isn't behind you. It's right now. So stop scrolling through social media comparing yourself to crypto kids, and start acting like the financial powerhouse you actually are. If this video changed how you think about aging and money, smash that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.